Hey guys, this is Jean, and welcome back. We're about to begin a brand new book. It's called Sexing the Cherry. The author is Jeanette Winterson, and a book that I have read by her before is called Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. She's another author who has a lot of clout in the gay and lesbian world, and I don't know why, but that's kind of my theme so far on my channel. You might have heard me read some modern erotica with Kyle on his channel. Kyle reads books. But this is what I'm doing on this channel. So this is Sexing the Cherry, and let's see, it was first published in 1989, and I guess I will read to you the blurb that's on the back of the book so that you can have a little idea. Sexing the Cherry celebrates the power of the imagination as it playfully juggles with our perceptions of history and reality, love and sex, lies and truths, and the 12 dancing princesses who lived happily ever after, but not with their husbands. I'll let you think about that for a second. Now, when I'm recording chapters for this book, there are not actual chapters. It's divided by speaker. From what I see, there's only 2 speakers in the novel, and you'll get to know who they are in a minute. And when I'm speaking, I don't really feel like signaling when there's a change in the speaker, like while I'm actually reading the words. So when I make the video, I'll have some sort of picture or something that depicts the change in narrator so you can understand. I feel like it would disrupt me if I told you the difference because the way it's divided here, there's a pineapple and then there's a banana. And then there's another pineapple and another banana. And I don't want to say banana out of nowhere. And I haven't read this whole book yet. I've read some. But when I get further into it, I see that there are units, I guess. There's a total of 3... There's at least 4 units in this book. So I guess I'll time it so that my chapters will end at those units. I basically have to invent chapters on my own, so bear with me. I'm making it up a little bit as I go, so I've decided where my chapter will end today. I hope it doesn't disrupt the book too much, so I hope you like this. This is Sexing the Cherry. Now there's a little introduction. It's not labeled an introduction, but there's a couple of paragraphs before the book actually starts, so I'll read that first. The Hopi, an Indian tribe, have a language as sophisticated as ours, but no tenses for past, present, and future. The division does not exist. What does this say about time? Matter, that thing the most solid and the well-known, which you are holding in your hands and which makes up your body, is now known to be mostly empty space and points of light. What does this say about the reality of the world? My name is Jordan. This is the first thing I saw. It was night, about 11:45, the sky divided in halves, one cloudy, the other fair. The clouds hung over the wood. There was no distance between them and the top of the trees. Where the sky was clear, over the river and the flat fields newly plowed, the moon, almost full, shone out of the yellow aureole and reflected in the bow of the water. There were cattle in the field across, black against the slope of the hill, not moving, sleeping. One light, glittering from the only house, looked like the moat light of a giant's castle. Tall trees flanked it. A horse ran loose in the courtyard, its hoofs sparking the stone. Then the fog came. The fog came from the river in thin spirals like spirits in a churchyard, and thickened with the force of a genie from a bottle. The bulrushes were buried first, then the trunks of the trees, then the forks and the junctions. The top of the trees floated in the fog, making suspended islands for the birds. The cattle were all drowned, and the moat like a lighthouse, appeared and vanished and appeared, cutting the air like a bright sword. The fog came towards me, and the sky that had been clear was covered up. It was bitterly cold, my hair was damp, and I had no hand warmer. I tried to find the path, but all I found were hares with staring eyes, poised in the middle of the field and turned to stone. I began to walk with my hands stretched out in front of me, as do those troubled in sleep, and in this way, for the first time, I traced the lineaments of my own face opposite me. Every journey conceals another journey within its lines, the path not taken and the forgotten angle. These are journeys I wish to record. Not the ones I made, but the ones I might have made, or perhaps did make in some other place or time. I could tell you the truth as you will find it in diaries and maps and logbooks. I could faithfully describe all that I saw and heard and give you a travel book. You could follow it then, tracing those words with your finger, putting red flags where I went. For the Greeks, the hidden life demanded invisible ink. They wrote an ordinary letter and in between the lines set out another letter, written in milk. The document looked innocent enough until one who knew better sprinkled coal dust over it. What the letter had been no longer mattered. What mattered was the life flaring up undetected. Till now. I discovered that my own life was written invisibly, was squashed between the facts, was flying without me like the 12 dancing princesses who shot from their window every night and returned home every morning with torn dresses and worn-out slippers, and remembered nothing. I resolved to set a watch on myself like a jealous father, trying to catch myself disappearing through a door just noticed in the wall. I knew I was being adulterous, that what I loved was not going on at home. I was giving myself the slip and walking through this world like a shadow. The longer I eluded myself, the more obsessed I became with the thought of discovery. Occasionally, in company, someone would snap their fingers in front of my face and ask, "Where are you?" For a long time I had no idea, but gradually I began to find evidence of the other life, and gradually it appeared before me. Remember the rock from whence ye are hewn, and the pit from whence ye are digged. My mother carved this on a medallion and hung it round my neck the day she found me in the slime by the river. I was wrapped up in a rotting sack such as kittens are drowned in, but my head was wedged uppermost against the bank. I heard dogs coming towards me and a roar in the water, and a face as round as the moon, with hair falling on either side, bobbed over me. She scooped me up. She tied me between her breasts, whose nipples stood out like walnuts. She took me home and kept me there with 50 dogs and no company but her own. I had a name, but I have forgotten it. They call me the dog woman, and it will do. I call him Jordan, and it will do. He has no other name before or after. What was there to call him, fished as he was from the stinking Thames? A child can't be called Thames. No, and not Nile either, for all his likeness to Moses. But I wanted to give him a river name, a name not bound to anything, just as the waters aren't bound to anything. When a woman gives birth, her waters break, and she pours out the child, and the child runs free. I would have liked to pour out a child from my body, but you have to have a man for that, and there's no man who's a match for me. When Jordan was a baby, he sat on top of me, much as the fly rests on a hill of dung. And I nourished him as a hill of dung nourishes a fly, and when he had eaten his fill, he left me. Jordan. I should have named him after a stagnant pond, and then I could have kept him. But I named him after a river, and in the flood tide he slipped away. When Jordan was 3, I took him to see a great rarity, and that was my undoing. There was news that one Thomas Johnson had got himself an edible fruit of the like never seen in England. This Johnson, though he'd been dead for 20 years now, was an herbalist by trade, though I'd say he was more than that. When a woman found herself too round for her liking and showing no blood by the moon, it was Johnson she visited, with only a lantern for company. And when she came back all flat and smiling, she said it was mistletoe or catnip or some such, but I say he sucked it out for the devil. Nevertheless, it being daylight and a crowd promised such as we only see for a dog and a bear, I took Jordan on a hound lead and pushed my way through the gawpers and sinners until we got to the front, and there was Johnson himself, trying to charge money for a glimpse of the thing. I lifted Jordan up, and I told Johnson that if he didn't throw back his cloth and let us see this wonder, I'd cram his face so hard into my breasts that he'd wished he'd never been suckled by a woman, so truly would I smother him. He starts humming and hawing, and reaching for some colored jar behind his head, and I thought, he'll not let no genie out on me with its forked tongue and balls like jewels, so I grabbed him and started to push him into my dress. He was soon coughing and crying because I haven't had that dress off in 5 years. Well then, I said, holding him back, the way you would a weasel, where is this wonder? God save me, he cried. A moment for my smelling salts, dear lady. But I would have none of it, and whipped off the cover myself, and I swear that what he had resembled nothing more than the private parts of an Oriental. It was yellow and livid and long. It is a banana, madam, said the rogue. A banana? What on God's good earth was a banana? Such a thing never grew in paradise, I said. Indeed it did, madam, says he, all puffed up like a poison adder. This fruit is from the island of Bermuda, which is closer to paradise than you will ever be. He lifted it up above his head, and the crowd, seeing it for the first time, roared and nudged each other and demanded to know what poor fool had been so reduced as to sell his vitality. It's either painted or infected, said I, for there's none such a color that I know. Johnson shouted above the din as best as he could. This is not some unfortunate's rake. It is the fruit of a tree. It is to be peeled and eaten. At this there was unanimous retching. There was no good woman could put that to her mouth, and for a man it was the practice of cannibals. We had not gone to church all these years and been washed in the blood of Jesus only to eat ourselves up the way the heathen do. I pulled on the hound lead in order to take Jordan away, but the lead came up in my hands. I ducked down into the shuffle of bare feet and torn stockings and a gentleman's buckle here and there. He was gone. My boy was gone. I let out a great bellow, such as cattle do, and would have gone on bellowing till kingdom come, had not some sinner taken my ear and turned me to look under Johnson's devilish table. I saw Jordan standing rock still. He was standing with both his arms upraised and staring at the banana above Johnson's head. I put my head next to his head, and looked where he looked, and I saw deep blue waters against a pale shore, and trees whose branches sang with green, and birds in fair-ground colors, and an old man in a loincloth. This was the first time Jordan set sail. London is a foul place, full of pestilence and rot. I would like to take Jordan to live in the country, but we must be near Hyde Park so that I can enter my dogs in the races and fighting. Every Saturday I come home covered in saliva and bitten to death, but with money in my pocket, and needing nothing but a body for company. My neighbor, who is so blackened and hairless that she has twice been mistaken for a sack of salt beef wrapped in muslin, airs herself abroad as a witch. No one knows her age. What age can there be for such a piece of leather like a football that serves as a head and a fantastical mass of rags that serves as a body? Not I, nor anyone else, has ever seen her feet beneath her skirts, so there's no knowing what it is she walks on. Her hands, always beckoning and twisting, look like the shriveled monkeys the organ grinders carry. She hardly moves, but her hands are never still, scratching her head and her groin and darting out to snatch food and ram it square into her mouth. I'm not one for a knife and spoon myself, but I do know how to eat it in company. I know how to use my bread as a plate and dollop the stew on it without spilling the lot down my dress. One look at her chin, and it takes no witchery to divine what she has been eating these 3 weeks since. When I found Jordan, so caked in mud I could have baked him like a hedgehog, she helped me wash him down to find out what his sex was. All the time I was trying to soften his coating with a sponge of hot water. She was scraping at him with her darting fingers and pulling bits off the way you would from a dog that's been hunting. "He'll break your heart," said she, glad to have found a mischief so close to home. "He'll make you love him, and he'll break your heart." Then she stopped a while and put her ear on his chest, and the noise of his beating heart filled the room. "There's many will want this heart, but none will have it. None save one, and she will spurn it." Then the crone almost choked herself to death on her cackles, and I had to bang her on the back until she spat up some phlegm and thanked me for my pains. Truth to tell, I could have snapped her spine like a fishbone. Had I done so, perhaps I could have changed our fate, for fate may hang on any moment, and at any moment be changed. I should have killed her and found us a different story. She crawled off into the night, and I walked out after her. I was invisible then. I, who must turn sideways through any door, can melt into the night as easily as a thin thing that sings in the choir at church. Singing is my pleasure, but not in church, for the parson said the gargoyles must remain on the outside, not seek room in the choir stalls. So I sing inside the mountain of my flesh, and my voice is as slender as a reed, and my voice has no lard in it. When I sing, the dogs sit quiet, and people who pass in the night stop their jabbering in discontent, and think of other times, when they were happy. And I sing of other times, when I was happy, though I know that these are figments of my mind, and nowhere have I ever been. But does it matter if the place cannot be mapped, as long as I can still describe it? One night Jordan took me sailing. We set off when the tide was high and the day was ebbing. We sailed down the Thames and out into the sea, and I kept looking back and marveling at how quickly the sights I knew best vanish. Jordan said the stars can take you anywhere. On either side low buildings hung over the water, their floors well raised on poles. Here and there the dredgers waded in between these poles, swirling the dark mass with their sticks and filling their wicker baskets with rubbish. Only a week ago one found an anchor said to have come from Rome, and we were all barbarians with our hair at our waists. The dredgers have no pride and will duck into the filth for anything. It is true that one of their company lives in a fine manor house in Chelsea, but for all his elevation he and his wife and brats still resemble the waste that sustains them. She is a brown string, and he is a great turd. Their children fill up the lawn like rabbit droppings. I am a sinner, and common withal, but if I had trade enough for a rope of pearls, I'd wash my neck before I wore them. Jordan told me to put on my best clothes for our voyage. I did so, and a plumed hat that sat on my head as a bird nests in a tree. He gave me a comfortable seat and asked me 10 times or more whether I was warm enough. I was warm. I was seeing the world. When it was fully dark, Jordan lit lanterns round the sides of the boat. He came to me and said it was the shortest night of the year, and that in a few hours the sun would be up, and I would see something I've never seen before. He wouldn't say anything else, and I racked my brains to think what flights of fancy he might have made for me. Besides, I pride myself on having seen more than most, including a mummy from Egypt. I didn't see the bandages themselves, but I saw the gilded tomb as it passed through London on its way to Enstone. It was a present from good Queen Henrietta to a favorite of hers who had made a wondrous garden full of continental devices. And I have seen a banana. What, then, could Jordan have prepared? We waited in the boat on the soft smacking on either side, and Jordan told me stories of the places he'd been and the plants he'd brought back to England. He's seen all the French ways, and the Italian too, and he's been to Persia with John Tredescant. Tredescant died soon after Jordan brought the first pineapple to England, but in the years before he filled his house in Lambeth with oddities and rarities from the far ends of the earth. The Ark, as it pleased him to call his home, was so jammed with curiosities that a visitor might never find room to hang his hat. But the very great went there, including the king, and I have seen the king. What wonders are there left? Look, said Jordan. We were out at sea. Gray waves with white heads, a thin line in the distance where the sky dropped into the water. There were no birds, no buildings, no people, and no boats. A light wind ruffled us. Then we saw the sun. We saw the sun rising over the water, and the light got louder and louder until we were shouting to make ourselves heard, and I saw the sun on Jordan's face, and the last glimmer of lanterns, and against the final trace of the moon a flight of seagulls that came from nowhere and seemed to be born of the sun itself. We stayed where we were in the rocking water until the night fishermen came in silent convoy. They hailed us and threw Jordan 2 fishes, and then, looking at me, they threw him a 3rd. I had brought a loaf of bread, and we cooked our breakfast and left the remains to the circling gulls. Then we sailed home with the sun on our backs, and as we entered the Thames I looked behind me once more. What I remember is the shining water and the size of the world. The shining water and the size of the world. I have seen both again and again since I left my mother on the banks of the Black Thames. but in my mind it is always the same place I return to, and that one place not the most beautiful nor the most surprising. To escape from the weight of the world, I leave my body where it is, in conversation or at dinner, and walk through a series of winding streets to a house standing back from the road. The streets are badly lit, and the distance from one side to the other no more than the span of my arms. The stone crumbles, the cobbles are uneven. The people who throng the streets shout at each other, their voices rising from the massive heads and floating upwards towards the church spires and the great copper bells that climb the end of the day. Their words, rising up, form a thick cloud over the city, which every so often must be thoroughly cleansed of too much language. Men and women in balloons fly up from the main square, and armed with mops and scrubbing brushes, do battle with the canopy of words trapped under the sun. The words resist erasure. The oldest and most stubborn form a thick crust of chattering rage. Cleaners have been bitten by words still quarreling, and in one famous lawsuit a woman whose mop had been eaten and whose hand was badly mauled by a vicious row sought to bring the original antagonists to court. The men responsible made their defense on the grounds that the words no longer belonged to them. Years had passed. Was it their fault if the city had failed to deal with its overheads? The judge ruled against the plaintiff, but ordered the city to buy her new mop. She was not satisfied, and was later found lining the chimneys of the accused with vitriol. I once accompanied a cleaner in a balloon, and was amazed to hear, as the sights of the city dropped away, a faint murmuring like bees. The murmuring grew louder and louder till it sounded like the clamoring of birds, then like the deafening noise of school children let out for the holidays. She pointed with her mop, and I saw a vibrating mass of many colors appear before us. We could no longer speak to each other and be heard. She aimed her mop at a particularly noisy bright red band of words who, from what I could make out, had escaped from a group of young men on their way home from a brothel. I could see from the set of my companion's mouth that she found this particular job distasteful, but she persevered, and in a few moments all that remained was the fading pink of a few ghostly swear words. Next we were attacked by a cloud of wrath spewed from a parson caught fornicating his mother. The cloud wrapped around the balloon, and I feared for our lives. I could not see my guide, but I could hear her coughing against the noxious smell. Suddenly I was drenched in a sweet fluid, and all returned to lightness. "I have conquered them with holy water," she said, showing me a stone jar marked with the bishop's seal. After that our task was much easier. Indeed, I was sorry to see the love sighs of young girls swept away. My companion, though she told me it was strictly forbidden, caught a sonnet in a wooden box and gave it to me as a memento. If I open the box by the tiniest amount I may hear it, repeating itself endlessly as it is destined to do until someone sets it free. Towards the end of the day we joined with the other balloons brushing away the last few stray and vagabond words. The sky under the setting sun was the color of veined marble, and a great peace surrounded us. As we descended through the clean air we saw, passing us by from time to time, new flocks of words coming from people in the streets who, not content with the weight of their lives, continually turned the heaviest of things into the lightest of properties. We landed outside the university, where the dons, whose arguments had so thickly populated the ether that they had seen neither sun nor rain for the past 5 years, welcomed us like heroes and took us in to feast. That night, 2 lovers whispering under the lead canopy of the church were killed by their own passion. Their effusion of words, unable to escape through the Saturnian discipline of lead, so filled the spaces of the loft that the air was all driven away. The lovers suffocated, but when the sacristan opened the door, the words tumbled him over in their desire to be free, and were seen flying across the city in the shape of doves. When Jordan was a boy, he made paper boats and floated them on the river. From this he learned how the wind affects a sail, but he never learned how love affects the heart. His patience was exceeded only by his hope. He spent days and nights with his bits of wood salvaged from chicken crates, and any piece of paper he could steal became a sail. I used to watch him standing in the mud or lying face down, his nose almost in the current, his hands steadying the boat and then letting it go straight into the wind. Letting go hours of himself. When the time came, he did the same with his heart. He didn't believe in shipwreck. And he came home to me with his bones broken, as his face streaked with tears, and we sat with our lamp and mended what we could, and the next day was the first day all over again. But when he lost his heart, there was no one to sit with him. He was alone. In the city of words that I have told you about, the smell of wild strawberries was the smell characteristic of the house that I have not yet told you about. The runners of these plants spread from the beds bounded by stone tiles and fastened themselves over terracotta pots and flaking ironwork, and hid the big flags that paved the courtyard. Anyone coming to the outer gate would find themselves confronted by waves of green dotted underneath with tiny red berries, some clutched in spiders' webs like forgotten rubies. There was a way through to an oaked door, and beyond the door, the square hall of the house with other doors leading off it. There were 4 suits of armor in the hall, and a mace. The family who lived in the house were dedicated to a strange custom. Not one of them would allow their feet to touch the floor. Open the doors off the hall, and you will see, not floors, but bottomless pits. The furniture of the house is suspended on racks from the ceiling, the dining table supported by great chains, each length 6 inches thick. To dine here is a great curiosity, for the visitor must sit in a gilded chair and allow himself to be winched up to join his place-setting. He comes last, the householders already seated and making merry, swinging their feet over the abyss where crocodiles live. Everyone who dines has a multiplicity of glasses and cutlery, lest some should be dropped accidentally. Whatever food is left over at the end of the meal is scraped into the pit, from whence a fearful crunching can be heard. When everyone has eaten their fill, the gentlemen remain at the table, and the ladies walk in order of precedence across a tightrope to another room, where they may have biscuits and wine with water. It is well known that the ceiling of one room is the floor of another, but the household ignores this ever downward necessity and continues ever upward, celebrating ceilings but denying floors, and so their house never ends, and they must travel by winch or rope from room to room, calling to one another as they go. The house is empty now, but it was there, dangling over dinner, illuminated by conversation and rich in the juices of a wild duck, that I noticed a woman whose face was a sea voyage I had not the courage to attempt. I did not speak to her, though I spoke to all the rest, and at midnight she put on flat pumps and balanced the yards of rope without faltering. She was a dancer. I spent the night in my suspended bed and slept badly. At dawn I was leaning out of the window, a rope round my waist. The moon was still visible. It seemed to me that I was closer to the moon than to the ground. A cold wind numbed my ears. Then I saw her. She was climbing down from her window on a thin rope which she cut and re-knotted a number of times during the descent. I strained my eyes to follow her, but she was gone. That's it for today. Let me know what you guys think about Sexing the Cherry so far. Well, there were a lot of different stories in that one piece that I read, so tell me what you like so far. I'm so excited to hear your thoughts about this new book. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.